September 8th, 1941. The outskirts of Schlesselburg, Soviet Union. The air is thick with the acrid stench of burning grain and cordite. Private Mikhail Volkov grips his Mosin Nagant rifle until his knuckles turn white, peering through the jagged ruins of a brick factory. To the west, the elegant spires of Leningrad, the cradle of the revolution, glimmer like a mirage under a pale autumn sun. But to the south and east, the horizon is a jagged line of panzer tanks and field-gray uniforms. A sudden, earth-shaking roar erupts as a battery of German 15-centimeter heavy howitzers opens fire. The ground shudders. Mikhail watches in horror as a black plume of smoke rises from the Badayev warehouses on the city's edge. He doesn't know it yet, but that smoke represents the city's food reserves, thousands of tons of flour and sugar melting into the dirt. "They aren't charging," his sergeant mutters, spitting a bit of grit from his lip. "They're just sitting there." The German High Command, acting on Hitler's Directive number 1601, has made a cold, calculated decision. Why waste German blood in street-to-street fighting when the climate and the stomach can do the work for them? The last rail link has been severed. The pincers of the Wehrmacht's Army Group North have met the Finnish forces to the north. The ring is closed. Inside the city, 3 million souls are suddenly aware of a terrifying silence. The trains have stopped. The telegraph lines are dead. As dusk falls, the first air raid sirens begin their rhythmic, mournful wail. People descend into the metro stations, not realizing that for many, these damp tunnels will become a semi-permanent home. In the Hermitage Museum, the curators work frantically by candlelight, packing Da Vinci's and Rembrandt's into wooden crates for evacuation. But the tracks are already gone. The city is no longer a metropolis. It is an island of stone and flesh surrounded by a sea of steel. The blockade, the blockade, has begun. Mikhail looks up as a Luftwaffe Junkers Ju-87 Stuka screams overhead, its siren wailing like a banshee. He sees a single leaflet flutter down from the sky. He picks it up. It doesn't demand surrender. It simply states that Leningrad will be wiped from the face of the earth. The first frost of September nips at his fingers. It is a warning of the predator currently waking up. A Russian winter that will be the coldest in a century. And a hunger that will soon turn neighbors into strangers. December 12th, 1941. Apartment 4, Litany Avenue, Leningrad. The thermometer on the wall is a cruel joke. It stopped registering when the mercury retreated into the bulb at -30 degrees Celsius. Inside the darkened room, Yelena, a former conservatory student, can no longer feel her feet. The burzhuyka, a makeshift iron stove, flickers with the last remains of a mahogany chair. To keep it burning, she has already sacrificed her bookshelves and her father's desk. The silence of the city is heavy, broken only by the rhythmic tok-tok of the metronome broadcast over the radio. The heartbeat of Leningrad that tells the citizens the signal is still live, that the city still breathes. "Mama, is it time?" Her younger brother Kolya whispers from beneath a mountain of tattered blankets. Yelena looks at the small gray slab on the table. It is their daily ration, 125 grams of bread. In this winter of 1941, the bread is a grim alchemy of sawdust, cellulose, and a tiny fraction of rye flour. It feels like damp clay in the hand. She carefully cuts the slab into 3 tiny pieces with a sewing needle to ensure not a single crumb is lost. Outside the window, the majestic Nevsky Prospect is a graveyard of frozen trolley cars. There is no water. The pipes have burst long ago. People trek to the Neva River, hacking holes in the ice to haul up buckets of frigid, gray water. Many simply collapse on the way back, their hearts giving out from the sheer effort. The dystrophy has set in, a medical term for the slow, agonizing process of the body consuming its own muscle and organ tissue to stay alive. Every day, the ritual is the same. Yelena pulls a small wooden sled behind her. On it lies a bundle wrapped in a stained bedsheet. Their neighbor, an elderly professor who died 3 days ago. She passes dozens of others doing the same, pulling their dead to the local collection points. There are no tears. The cold has frozen the tear ducts. The hunger has stripped away the luxury of grief. In the dark corners of the city, darker rumors circulate. The joiners, those who have lost their minds to starvation, lurk in shadows. The police, the NKVD, patrol the streets with orders to shoot anyone caught with suspicious meat. The social contract is fraying at the edges, held together only by the grim, stoic resolve of those who refuse to let the Hitlerites see them break. Suddenly, the air raid siren cuts through the frozen air. Yelena doesn't move. The shells from the German heavy railguns at Gatchina begin to fall, shattering the silence with the roar of crumbling masonry. She simply leans her head against the freezing wall and closes her eyes. To descend to the shelter requires energy she does not have. "Eat slowly, Kolya," she whispers, handing him the 40-gram morsel. "Make it last until tomorrow." Behind the German lines, Field Marshal von Lieb reviews his maps. He is satisfied. His intelligence reports indicate that the city is dying. He does not need to fire another bullet. He only needs to wait for the ice to do his work. But he has forgotten one thing. The ice that kills also provides a path. January 20th, 1942. The western shore of Lake Ladoga. Captain Alexei Ivanov guns the engine of his Gaz AA Polutorka truck. The vehicle groans, its radiator hissing steam into the brutal -40 degrees Celsius air. Behind him, a convoy of headlights flickers like a line of ghost ships across the vast, white expanse of the frozen lake. This is the Doroga Zhizny, the road of life. Alexei keeps his driver's side door propped open with a block of wood. It's a suicidal precaution. If the ice cracks under the weight of his 3-ton load of flour, he has exactly 2 seconds to jump before the truck plunges into the black, freezing depths of Ladoga. The ice here is a living thing, groaning and buckling under the pressure of the wind and the constant German bombardment. "Keep the distance," he shouts to his mate, though the words are swallowed by the roar of the wind. Above, the hum of Luftwaffe Heinkel. He-111 bombers grows louder. They hunt the convoy by the moonlight, reflecting off the snow. A fountain of ice and water erupts 50 yards ahead as a 250-kilogram bomb strikes the lake. The truck in front of Alexei swerves, its rear wheels skidding over the edge of a fresh crater. For a heartbeat, it teeters. Then it vanishes. No scream, just the muffled splash of water and the sound of the lake reclaiming its silence. Alexei doesn't stop. He can't. To stop is to freeze. To stop is to deny 1,000 children their ration for the week. On the return trip, his truck won't be empty. He will carry the evacuees, skeletal figures wrapped in rags, their eyes wide and vacant. He remembers the mother he loaded yesterday. Iggy, she had held a bundle so still, he knew the child hadn't survived the journey to the shore. He had to look away as he closed the tailgate. Back in the city, the road of life is a myth that keeps hearts beating. Every gram of sawdust-laden bread that reaches the distribution centers has been paid for in the blood of drivers like Alexei. By the end of the winter, The bottom of Lake Ladoga will be a graveyard of twisted metal and sunken grain. But the miracle is working. The bread ration for workers is raised slightly to 350 grams. It is not a feast, but it is the difference between a funeral and a future. The German High Command is baffled. Their aerial reconnaissance shows a city of shadows, yet the factories are still producing T-34 tank parts, and the snipers in the ruins are still firing back. Alexei reaches the eastern shore, his hands frozen to the steering wheel. As the workers begin to unload the flour sacks, he collapses into the snow, gasping for air. He looks back at the white horizon. The road is still there. Leningrad is still there. 20 tons tonight, a commissar says, scribbling in a notebook. Not enough. Send the next column. August 9th, 1942. The Bolshoi Zal of the Leningrad Philharmonia. Karl Eliasberg, the conductor of the Leningrad Radio Orchestra, stands on the podium. He looks less like a maestro and more like a ghost. His tuxedo hangs loosely off a frame that has lost 30 pounds. His baton hand trembles, not from nerves, but from the lingering tremors of malnutrition. Behind him, the orchestra is a patchwork of survivors. Some musicians had to be carried to rehearsals on stretchers. Others were recalled from the front lines, still wearing their dirt-stained Red Army tunics. During the first few practices, the brass section had been unable to play. They simply didn't have the breath to blow into their instruments. Today, however, the air in the hall is electric. Outside, the German artillery is strangely silent. This is because the Soviet military has launched Operation Squall, a massive preemptive artillery strike specifically designed to silence the German guns for the duration of the concert. Begin, Eliasberg whispers. The first notes of Dmitri Shostakovich's Symphony No. 7, the Leningrad, swell through the hall. It is a wall of sound, violent, chaotic, and triumphantly loud. The music is broadcast through every loudspeaker in the city and, more importantly, through the radio frequencies used by the German troops entrenched just miles away. In the German trenches, General von Küchler listens to the radio in stunned disbelief. His officers told him Leningrad was a city of the dead, a tomb waiting to be sealed. Yet, through the static comes the roar of a full orchestra, and a defiant wall of culture and human spirit that shells could not crush. One German soldier would later write in his diary, "At that moment, we realized we would never take this city. We were fighting people who could play symphonies while they starved." In the hall, the audience, mostly soldiers and factory workers, weeps openly. They aren't crying for the dead, but for the realization that they are still human. The music proves that they are more than just numbers on a ration card or bodies on a sled. The symphony reaches its thunderous crescendo, a brassy, victorious march that drowns out the distant thud of the front lines. As the final note fades, there is a moment of absolute, ringing silence. Then, a roar of applause that lasts for over an hour. Eliasberg lowers his baton. He has no strength left to bow, for he has sent a message to the world, and more importantly, to the enemy. Leningrad is not a corpse. It is a fortress. But the victory is symbolic. Beyond the music, the steel of the Wehrmacht remains. The winter of 1942 is approaching, and the blockade has yet to be broken. January 12th, 1943. The marshlands of Mariino, Leningrad front. Major General Leonid Govorov checks his watch. It is 9:30 hours. The temperature has dropped to minus 25 degrees Celsius. But the atmosphere among the Soviet troops is white-hot with anticipation. For over a year, The Red Army has been pinned against the city's walls. Today, they strike back. Fire, Govorov commands. Suddenly, 4,500 Soviet guns, mortars, and Katyusha rocket launchers ignite the horizon. The dawn sky turns a bruised, violent purple. The ground beneath the feet of the Leningrad front soldiers ripples like water. This is Operation Iskra, the spark. Across the frozen Neva River, the soldiers of the 67th Army do not wait for the barrage to end. They charge across the ice, not in a desperate scramble, but in a disciplined wave. Among them is Sergeant Viktor Smirnov, a veteran who has survived the worst of the winter. He carries a submachine gun and a specialized spiked ladder to scale the steep, icy embankments of the German-held left bank. For Leningrad! The cry ripples through the ranks, a roar from 1,000 parched throats. The Germans of the 18th Army are dug into the Schlosselburg-Sinyavino corridor, a narrow strip of land only 15 kilometers wide that separates the Leningrad front from the Volkhov front. They have spent a year turning this marshland into a labyrinth of concrete bunkers, minefields, and barbed wire. Viktor reaches the embankment under a hail of MG-42 fire. The ice chips fly like glass shards. Beside him, a comrade falls, but the momentum is unstoppable. The Soviet troops aren't just fighting for territory. They are fighting for the very air the city breathes. The T-34 tanks, painted in winter white camouflage, roar across the ice, their wide tracks gripping the frozen surface where the heavier German panzers would have foundered. For 6 days, the fighting is savage and hand-to-hand. The corridor of death is choked with the debris of war. In the forests of Sinyavino, the snow is stained a deep, permanent crimson. Finally, on January 18th, at 9:30 a.m., the forward elements of the 123rd Rifle Division from the city meet the units of the 372nd Rifle Division coming from the east. They embrace near Workers' Settlement Number 5. It is a scene of raw, cinematic emotion, men weeping and kissing each other's frozen cheeks. A land corridor, however narrow and precarious, has been opened. Within hours, engineers begin laying railroad tracks across the muddy, shell-pocked earth. The blockade is not yet fully lifted, but the ring has been cracked. For the first time in 500 days, a train can steam directly into Leningrad. It carries the first real flour, the first real meat, and the first hope that the end of the nightmare is finally in sight. January 27th, 1944. The heights of Pulkovo. The dawn does not break with light, but with a firestorm. After a year of stalemate following the opening of the narrow land corridor, the Red Army has amassed a force of overwhelming proportions. Over 1.2 million troops, 1,500 tanks, and 2,500 aircraft are poised to strike the final blow. General Govorov, now a master of rhythmic destruction, coordinates the Leningrad-Novgorod offensive. This isn't just a battle, it is an exorcism. At the Pulkovo Observatory, which has sat on the front lines for years like a scarred sentinel, Soviet observers watch as the sky turns orange. The heavy siege guns of the Baltic Fleet, stationed in the harbor, join the chorus. These are the guns that once defended the city. Now, they are the hammers of its liberation. Private Mikhail Volkov, the same soldier who watched the Badaev warehouses burn in 1941, is now a veteran sergeant. He stands in a trench, his face lined with the weight of 800 days of siege. He watches the Katyusha rockets streak overhead, their screaming "Stalin's organs" signature tearing through the freezing air. Forward! The command echoes through the whistles. The German 18th Army, which has occupied the suburbs of Leningrad for nearly 3 years, finally begins to buckle. Their bunkers, built with the stolen labor of Soviet civilians, are pulverized. The Wehrmacht, once the invincible conquerors of Europe, are forced into a chaotic retreat westward toward the Baltic states. By evening, the unthinkable has happened. When the German artillery positions at Krasnoye Selo, the very guns that had rained death upon the city's hospitals and schools, are captured. Mikhail stands over a silent 210mm German mortar. He kicks a spent shell casing, watching it roll into the snow. The silence is the most beautiful thing he has heard in years. Back in the city, the news spreads like wildfire. People who had been too weak to walk crawl to their windows. At 8 p.m., for the first time in the war, the blackout curtains are pulled back. The Soviet government authorizes a unique tribute. Normally, victory salutes are fired in Moscow. But tonight, the honor belongs to Leningrad. 324 guns fire 24 salvos, lighting up the winter sky with green, red, and gold flares. The spires of the Admiralty and the Peter and Paul Fortress, which had been camouflaged with gray paint for years, are illuminated by the pyrotechnics. Yelena, having survived the hunger that claimed so many, stands on her balcony. The flashes of the salute reveal the hollow cheeks and sunken eyes of her neighbors. But for the first time, those eyes are wet with tears that do not freeze. The metronome on the radio stops its frantic ticking and is replaced by the national anthem. The siege is over. It has lasted 872 days. The cost is etched into every stone of the city. More than 1 million civilians are dead, a number greater than the combined wartime casualties of the United Kingdom and the United States. But as the sun rises on January 28th, the people of Leningrad do not look like victims. They look like the victors of the most horrific test of endurance in human history. The white sorrow of the snow remains, but beneath it, the heart of the city beats with a strength that the world will never forget.